time by Caracas is 6 p.m. and this is CBX Business News. The business news headlines are brought to you by QMax Wealth Management, making more possible. New procurement opportunities, CARICOM connectivity, and Europe unveils a multi-billion euro defense plan. Good evening and welcome to CBX Business News for Thursday, July 9, 2026. I'm Rashel Moncrieffe. Thanks for joining us. Coming up, the Public Procurement Commission will launch a verified MSME supplier registry on July 31, creating a new tool to help identify eligible small business suppliers. Also ahead, CARICOM is fast-tracking a regional ferry plan aimed at boosting trade, lowering transport costs, and improving connectivity. And later, the European Union is targeting 800 billion euros in defense investment by 2030 under a new plan to strengthen security and industrial capacity. Stay with us as we unpack these stories and more right after the break.
This project marks a celebration of our 30th Hall of Fame and aims to highlight the achievements, challenges, and invaluable lessons of those who have shaped and are shaping the future of our economy. Our aim is to celebrate the voices and stories of 30 remarkable leaders in Jamaica's private sector. Join us as we explore these narratives of resilience, leadership, and vision.
I'm trading stocks to achieve my financial goals.
I'm also trading stocks to achieve my financial goals.
Start a conversation with the Jamaica Stock Exchange.
Check jamstockx.com for information and a list of registered stockbrokers. You can also call the Jamaica Stock Exchange at 876-967-3271 for information on how to begin. I am achieving my financial goals.
I'm achieving my financial goals.
The local news is brought to you by Derrimon Trading, better from the start. The Development Bank of Jamaica, facilitating economic growth and development. Caribbean Flavors and Fragrances, tease the senses, and Pulse Investments. Welcome back to CBX Business News. We begin with a major boost for Jamaica's small business sector. The Public Procurement Commission, PPC, has announced that it will launch Jamaica's first verified registry of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprise MSME suppliers on July 31, marking a significant step towards expanding local businesses' access to government contracts. The registry forms part of the newly launched MSME Procurement Integration Project and is designed to help procuring entities quickly identify eligible MSMEs when applying the government's public procurement set-asides order. Speaking at the launch, PPC Executive Director Nadia Morris says the registry will strengthen implementation of the government's procurement policy by ensuring eligible MSMEs are no longer overlooked.
So I'm pleased to announce that the MSME Registry of Verified Suppliers will be released by the PPC on July 31st via the PPC's website. This development is a huge leap in ensuring that MSMEs will not be overlooked by procuring entities. It is also an essential step in facilitating MSMEs' inclusion into the multi-billion-dollar public procurement pie as they seek to maximize their income earning potential.
Meanwhile, Morris says the project will strengthen implementation of the public procurement set-asides order by making it easier for more MSMEs to compete for government contracts.
And the MSME Procurement Integration Project highlights the Public Procurement Set-Asides Order 2019 and will enable more MSMEs to benefit from this policy framework, which guarantees MSMEs 20% of the allocation of public procurement opportunities. The project will, first and foremost, simplify and streamline the supplier registration process to reduce administrative barriers for small businesses.
That was PPC Executive Director Nadia Morris. At the same time, President of the Small Business Association of Jamaica, SBAJ, Garnet Reed, says while the government's 20% procurement set-aside is in place, the responsibility now shifts to MSMEs to obtain the training and qualifications needed to compete for public contracts.
SME sector is the engine of growth of the Jamaican economy and account for approximately 80% of employment and contribute millions in tax revenue. We hope the SME sector, no SME sector will be left behind. It is now up to the small business operator to get the necessary training and qualify for the 20% set aside.
That was SBAJ President Garnet Reed. In other news, the Development Bank of Jamaica, DBJ, is preparing to relaunch its Gemini financing program after overhauling the initiative based on lessons learned from its pilot phase. Managing Director Dr. David Lowe says the redesigned program is expected to strengthen financing support for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises as they pursue new growth opportunities, including government procurement contracts.
We'll also be introducing very soon a revamp of the Gemini program that many of you might be familiar with. It was a pilot. We learned a lot of lessons about execution. We are now looking at a review, and our good friends at the JBDC has been our partner, looking at how we can improve what was a pilot and now to bring all those lessons learned to a much more impactful launch. So we'll be hearing a little bit more about that soon.
The DBJ Managing Director is also encouraging more micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises to take advantage of its Credit Enhancement Fund.
The government of Jamaica, through the DBJ, has been able to provide one of the most impactful solutions for entrepreneurs. And this is our Credit Enhancement Program. Simply, it is a program that provides a facility through AFIs, which are banks, bankers that you operate with day to day. You need to ask them, how can I access this collateral support, which represents 80% of any loan that you have been approved, to be able to support in your collateral requirement to be able to get funding. It is a tremendous asset.
That was DBJ Managing Director Dr. David Lowe. Now to news from the petroleum market. Jamaica's fuel prices changed on Thursday with movements recorded across several petroleum products. Automotive diesel increased by $2.44 and is now selling for $206.50 per liter. 87 gasoline rose by $4.50 to $198.28, while 90 gasoline also increased by $4.50 to $205.71. Propane, however, declined by 25 cents to $75.82. Kerosene increased by $1.27 to $187.42, while butane edged up by 25 cents to $84.79. Meanwhile, ultra-low sulfur diesel rose by $3.06, bringing the price to $222.09 per liter. We go now to updates from the Bank of Jamaica on how the currency markets traded today. In Thursday's currency trading session, the US dollar is selling for $159.76, the Canadian for $112.37, the pound sterling for $213.96, while the going rate for the euro is $181.82. We move to the latest updates from the JSE equities. In Thursday's trading session, the JSE market activity resulted in the trading of 109 stocks, of which 44 advanced, 44 declined, and 21 traded firm. Leading the winners are Jamaica Public Service Company 7%, G West Corporation Ordinary Shares, 138 Student Living Jamaica Variable Preference, and the Limnas and Bards. While leading the losers are Productive Business Solution USD Ordinary Shares, Palace Amusement Company, One-on-One Educational Services, and Image Plus Consultants. The main index advanced by 575.80 points to close at 361,486.06 points. However, the junior market index declined by 4.62 points to close at 2,995.86 points. It's time for the Market Education feature, brought to you by CARICRIS, Regional Ratings, Global Standards. In today's Market Education feature, we're talking about Jensen's Measure. Jensen's Measure, also known as Alpha, is a financial performance metric used to determine whether an investment or portfolio has outperformed or underperformed a benchmark after adjusting for risk. It compares an investment's actual return with the return expected under the Capital Asset Pricing Model, or CAPM. A positive Jensen's Measure indicates the investment generated returns above expectations, while a negative value suggests it underperformed. Investors and portfolio managers use Jensen's Measure to evaluate the performance of individual investments and professionally managed portfolios. That was the Market Education feature, brought to you by CARICRIS, Regional Ratings, Global Standards. And that's it for the local news segment. Please stay with us. The regional news is up next. The local news is brought to you by Derrimon Trading, better from the start. The Development Bank of Jamaica, facilitating economic growth and development. Caribbean Flavors and Fragrances, Tease the Senses, and Pulse Investments. Welcome back. And now for the regional business news. CARICOM leaders have agreed to accelerate plans for a regional ferry service, aiming to cut transportation costs, boost intra-regional trade, and strengthen food security. Speaking at the closing conference for the 51st regular meeting of CARICOM Heads of Government, CARICOM Chairman and St. Lucian Prime Minister Philip J. Peer says the ferry service is expected to improve regional connectivity while supporting economic integration.
We also accelerated work towards establishing an affordable intra-regional ferry service that will improve travel, facilitate trade, strengthen food security, and make our community more connected.
That was CARICOM Chairman and Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Philip J. Pierre. Meanwhile, Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley says reducing freight costs is central to lowering inflation and making regional trade more competitive. She says leaders have also agreed on the initial steps to get the ferry service underway.
The major initiative that we want to be able to do is to reduce the costs of cargo for intra-island trade. And it is against this backdrop that the long-awaited ferry is something that we're working on assiduously. But Prime Minister Prasad Bisesa has also agreed that pending the private sector arrangements, which may take as long as a year because they have to source vessels, while we do the regulatory work, hopefully between now and the next 3 months, that Trinidad and Tobago has had a history of using ferries between Trinidad and Tobago. I think you said you have 5 ferries, and we are now about to enter discussions, Prime Minister Friday from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Prime Minister Prasad Bisesa, and myself as lead on CSME, to see how best we can utilize one of the Trinidad vessels as a proof of concept while the private sector procures.
At the same time, Motley notes regional leaders are advancing the regulatory framework and infrastructure needed to bring the ferry service into operation.
And I've undertaken the responsibility of working with colleagues to be able to get the treaty arrangements for mutual recognition of licenses, insurance, so that vehicles, cargo vehicles, can literally go on and come off where possible. This is a work in progress, and it also involves the fact that some ports in the Southern Caribbean, and this is the proof of concept will first be in the Southern and Eastern Caribbean, but it requires us to also assess what other infrastructural arrangements might be needed at the port or whether ramps can be used. So I give you the assurance that we are singularly focused on being able to reduce the cost of intra-island cargo, which, in addition to the other measures that we have taken to increase disposable income of our citizens, but also to reduce the cost of freight, the cost of gas, and the cost of electricity.
That was Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley. Staying with developments from the recently concluded CARICOM Heads of Government meeting, CARICOM leaders have approved a series of initiatives aimed at making the region's economies more resilient and competitive. Among the measures are the establishment of a regional Blue Ribbon Commission on Artificial Intelligence, renewed commitments to climate action, and the development of a regional insurance and reinsurance strategy.
Recognizing that technology will shape our future, we also agreed to establish a regional Blue Ribbon Commission on Artificial Intelligence to guide the development of policies that will enable the Caribbean to benefit from AI while responsibly managing its risks. We reaffirmed our commitment to limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius and to advocating for the special circumstances of small island developing states. We also agreed to advance a regional insurance and reinsurance strategy to better protect our people, infrastructure, and economies against hurricanes and other natural disasters.
That was CARICOM Chairman and Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Philip J. Pierre. MODEC Guyana is expanding its investment in local talent as the country's oil and gas industry continues to create demand for highly skilled workers. The company has launched 2 workforce development programs, an 18-month offshore technical trainee program and a 2-year professional development program to prepare more Guyanese for careers supporting offshore oil production. MODEC, which is developing floating production vessels for ExxonMobil's Uaru and Hammerhead projects, says the initiative will strengthen Guyana's local talent pipeline while supporting the country's local content policy and expanding opportunities for permanent employment. The company says developing more local expertise will help Guyanese capture a greater share of the economic benefits from the country's growing offshore energy industry. In other news, business activity weakened for several Trinidad and Tobago energy services companies during the second quarter of 2026, although most firms remain optimistic about future growth. The latest energy services sector survey by the Energy Chamber of Trinidad and Tobago found that nearly 2/3 of companies reported below normal business activity, citing weaker demand, fewer contracts, and reduced project activity. Despite the slowdown, business confidence improved modestly. Most companies expect to maintain staffing levels, while nearly 69% plan to expand over the next year through technology investments, increased capacity, new services, and customer growth. The survey suggests companies remain focused on positioning themselves for a recovery in energy sector activity despite softer conditions this year. And staying in Trinidad and Tobago, here's an update from the stock market. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 19 securities, of which 9 advanced, 6 declined, and 4 traded firm. Today's winners are Point Lisas Industrial Port Development Corporation, the West Indian Tobacco Company, Massey Holdings, and First Citizens Group Financial Holdings, while leading the losers are Eric Solis Marketing, Ansa McCall, National Enterprises, and Endeavor Holdings. Trading activity resulted in the following movements. The All-TNT Index declined by 0.09 points to close at 1,441.99. However, the Composite Index advanced by 0.42 points to close at 998.24. The Cross-Listed Index also advanced, but by 0.14 points to close at 73.24, while the SME Index dropped 0.30 points to close at 79.13. And we take a short break, but please do stay with us. The international news segment is up next.
This project marks the celebration of our 30th Hall of Fame and aims to highlight the achievements, challenges, and invaluable lessons of those who have shaped and are shaping the future of our economy. Our aim is to celebrate the voices and stories of 30 remarkable leaders in Jamaica's private sector. Join us as we explore these narratives of resilience, leadership, and vision.
Welcome back. In international news, the European Union (EU) is moving to significantly increase defense spending, unveiling plans to mobilize up to 800 billion euros by 2030 to strengthen military capabilities and expand the region's defense industry. Speaking during a discussion on EU-NATO cooperation on Tuesday, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the Rearm Europe initiative is designed to respond to a rapidly evolving security environment through higher defense investment. A key component of the program is the 150 billion euro Security Action for Europe initiative, or SAFE, which will support joint procurement of military equipment by member states.
We have our Rearm Europe program, which mobilizes up to 800 billion euros till 2030. In this program is save 150 billion euros for joint procurement. And not to forget, the next long-term budget will have 131 billion euros for military capabilities, plus 17 billion euros for military mobility, which is also of utmost importance: streets, bridges, ports, airports, etc.
That was President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump is highlighting what he describes as record investment flowing into the American economy. Trump says the United States is experiencing record levels of business investment, crediting tariffs and manufacturing expansion for what he described as unprecedented economic momentum. Speaking alongside Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan during the NATO summit in Ankara, Trump claimed investment commitments have reached 19.2 trillion US dollars, surpassing previous records.
When you look at the economy, we have the greatest economy we've ever had. $19 trillion, $19.2 trillion to be exact, being invested in the United States. That's 7 or 8 times more than it's ever. It's a world record, not just a U.S. record.
Trump also announced that Toyota plans to move truck production from Mexico to the U.S. to build one of the country's largest automotive manufacturing facilities. He argued the decision reflects the impact of tariffs in encouraging companies to expand U.S. production.
That Toyota is moving out of Mexico into the United States and building one of the biggest truck and car plants ever built. That's amazing. That's what tariffs do, properly used. And so we've never had a more exceptional economy or potential economy.
That was President of the United States of America, Donald Trump. Turning to Russia, the country's federal budget deficit widened during the first half of 2026 as government spending continued to outpace revenue growth. Preliminary government estimates show the deficit reached 5.73 trillion rubles, equivalent to 2.5% of gross domestic product. The shortfall widened from 3.39 trillion rubles during the same period last year. Federal spending increased 16.1% to 24.35 trillion rubles, while revenues rose 5.8% to 18.62 trillion. Analysts say the figures underscore continued fiscal pressures as government expenditure remains elevated. And in Asia, China's food prices declined for a third consecutive month in June as abundant supplies and subdued consumer demand continued to weigh on inflation. Food prices fell 1.6% from a year earlier, following a 1.7% decline recorded in May. Prices continued falling for fresh fruit, edible oils, and dairy products, while fresh vegetable prices also declined after increasing the previous month. Pork prices, a key component of China's food basket, continued to fall as ample supplies outweighed demand. In contrast, egg prices continued rising, although the pace of growth slowed compared with the previous month. And that's it for the international segment of the newscast. The news recap is coming up on the other side of the break.
So much book you need for high school?
I'll show you how to make sure you have all the money for my books and even some extra. It's called budgeting, Dad. Making a budget is the most important thing you can do to track your money. It keeps a record of how much you make, how much you spend, where you spend it, and most importantly, how much you can save. Write down all your income, write down all your expenses, see where you can cut down and allot more money to more important things, like saving.
And now to recap our top stories. In the local news, PPC to launch verified MSME supplier registry on July 31. Regionally, CARICOM fast-tracks ferry plan to boost trade and cut costs. And internationally, EU targets €800 billion defense investment by 2030 on the new plan. Those were the stories making today's CBX Evening News. On behalf of the entire production team, I'm Rashel Moncrieffe. Thanks for watching CBX, your region, your business, your source.